proud to be the first government official here at Creative Mornings, and that's why I wore my government uniform. I have not given this presentation exactly before, so bear with me for a minute, please. Before I get started, I do want to thank my staff. There's a group of people from the Department of City Planning here, believe it or not, over here to my right, and this is a group of very patient people who are involved in this with me and really trying to find new ways to do this work. And that's what we come to City Hall every day talking about, is how do we make Atlanta an exceptional place? And we feel like this opportunity exists because of all of you and all the things happening in Atlanta. And what I'm going to go through here is a piece of work that we've done over the last couple of years that we think is the foundation of our work for the city. And so around the theme that Blake mentioned, and this is very much a design discussion, really, design at the city scale for the most part. And I want to start with the fact that there's two things about cities. One is that there were times when cities were things that were designed very intentionally. Of course, this is Philadelphia. This area of Philadelphia, which we all know, that's designed around these squares, the center square being City Hall, is about just over 2 square miles of the city. Hooray, Philly! Maybe that was for Savannah, which is the second one here. Also, as you know, Savannah designed around the squares, and very deep, intentional design around the city of Savannah, down to what building goes where around each of the squares. This area of Savannah, actually, the city commons of Savannah is comparable to Philadelphia. That original piece of Philadelphia in size is just over 2 square miles. If you look at the part of Savannah that Oglethorpe actually planned for, it also included an area of 5-acre plots outside the city commons, and then 45-acre plots beyond the 5-acre plot. So you could argue it's way bigger than 2 square miles. It was more of a regional plan. Then we'll move forward to Chicago in the early 20th century, which is this is a plan, and those of you that know design and planning are cringing right now that I even bring this up. But Chicago, this is an area of 60 or so square miles. The Chicago plan of 1909 was really a regional plan, but it defined Chicago very fundamentally. And the thing about this time in Chicago is Chicago was not a sophisticated place. It was a backwater, prairie town, slaughterhouse. In the early 20th century, and the business community got together and said, we need to present a different Chicago to the world, which is about the future and about quality and sophistication. So they engaged Burnham and Bennett, who did this design for the city. And it still defines the city today. Mayor Emanuel recently had a big event around the Chicago River called Building on Burnham, essentially describing Chicago as a city of 2 waterfronts, the lakefront and the riverfront. All that came from this plan of 1909. And as you know, in Chicago today, even buildings are critiqued in light of their adherence to what was envisioned in this early 20th century plan for Chicago. The scale of it was much larger, so the details were less specific, except for in some places where there were important recommendations around civic use, public realm. This was the plan that called for the Chicago River, the lakefront of Lake Michigan, to be public, and it now mostly is. So there's this matter of design at the big city scale. Then there's places like Charleston that didn't have a master plan. It was really a city that was built building by building, street by street, block by block, where people were making individual decisions as they moved along. Very different kind of circumstances, which resulted in an amazing kind of public realm that's very different than places that were designed around squares, where you have these amazing little lanes and alleyways and so forth. This is Longitude Lane. And people were basically placing buildings along these spaces in incredibly beautiful ways that endure today. At a bigger size, Boston is similar in the sense that it's not a master plan, it's very organic. Grew, like Charleston, a peninsula around the constraints that were there related to the harbors. And what we have, just through the beauty of architecture and of course, these are different times, but again, endure today. The emphasis on the spaces that we're creating for people is what makes these places so beautiful today. And so there's the design aspect of the city, and then there's the design aspect of the places that we share. So when I came to Atlanta, the fact of the matter is that Atlanta didn't have a plan. We have lots of plans, believe me. There's no shortage of plans. No one can understand them because they're not intentional. They're passive. They're reactive. They're lists of things, and they're statements that everyone could agree upon without even going to a meeting, kinds of things. So rather than doing that, we said, let's do something different, and let's actually design the city. In Atlanta's case, this is a city in a region that over the last generation of growth, the region grew tremendously and the city did not. So we in 1970, for instance, this was a region of 1.8 million in a city of 495,000 or so people. Today, we are a city of 475,000 people in a region of 6 million. So over the last generation of growth, the region grew tremendously. We know this, we see it. The city did not. The city was static. And we think that we have the opportunity to change that. The regional commission for this area, the Atlanta Regional Commission, is projecting that the region will grow by 2.5 million people over the next 25 years. Maybe it'll be longer than that, but whatever. Over the next generation of growth, it will grow by 2.5 million people. That's the equivalent of adding Charlotte and its region to ours over that period of time. So the scale of change is really significant. How can you do that? I talk to people about this and they're like, there's no way. How could you add that many people to this place? But we got someone to help us think about what should Atlanta aspire to absorb of that growth? What should we be designing for? How big a city should we be designing for? So we got someone that really understands these things. Believe me, I was not doing this. This was someone that really understands demographics and how things are changing in this country and in the South. And he suggested that the city should have 25% of that growth. Well, that would take our population 1.2 million in the city if we were able to provide a place that people would happily choose to live over the suburbs. We should get those 25%. The reason to grow is not to have more people. The reason to grow is to be a better place. And I want to say right now that tomorrow and next week and next month and 10 years from now, one thing that Atlanta has to have is more people in the city. And you could almost do anything, and as long as you got more people, things will get better. But we wanted to be very intentional about this and design it, and so we worked over a period of about 18 months with the residents of the city through our design studio. Ryan Gravel led this process for us through the Department of City Planning to come up with this design for the city. The design is built around these 5 principles. And I'll go quickly through them, but there's the matter of equity and that all of the progress and this growth and change that occurs is that everyone in the city benefits from that. That's the key issue around equity. And within the design itself, which is a book we've published at atlcitydesign.com, there's a lot of depth around each of these principles, including starting with equity, progress, that we are growing, but we're protecting people and places of meaning in the process from the market forces that would otherwise overrun them. That we have to be very protective of things within the city that are of value and of meaning to us as a community in the context of this kind of significant market change and growth. Ambition that we're taking this incredible change and we're ensuring that everyone in the city has the opportunity to create the life that they want. And that's very much, all of these things are Atlanta notions here, but certainly this one, that people in Atlanta, you all know this, it's one of the reasons I came here, that in Atlanta you can do anything, and that everyone has that opportunity. That as we grow our transportation system and find ways to get around the city, that the main issue around that is creating places. And I'll get more into that in a minute. And that finally, as we grow and become more urban, nature can thrive as well. And in Atlanta, that's critical, and I'll get back to this one in a minute as well. So the design itself is built around the city that we have. The idea was not to borrow ideas. You know, the idea was to say, what kind of a city do we have physically, and how do we accentuate that with our growth? So it's not, let's build a big lake in downtown Atlanta, or perhaps we could paint everything silver or something like that. That was not the point. It was really to say, what is this place, and how do we make it better? If we're intentional about how it grows, let's just understand this place and make it better. So it's built around, number one, the idea that we have growth areas downtown and the midtown area, the kind of core, and then these corridors that come out from the core, including the Beltline, but all the streets that either follow the topography or go over the hills from the core that are really our growth areas, and then conservation areas are the neighborhoods, essentially, of the city. And this is Atlanta's pattern seen in this image here. Again, a unique condition with this relatively compact core and then falling quickly to neighborhoods, that we have these streets, Peachtree being the most developed of them. Again, not at all perfect. Now we're being intentional, and we're saying, how can we make this condition better? But you have density, mixed use. You have as dense a place as you have in the south along a corridor that's directly adjacent to mostly tree-canopied, single-family-ish neighborhoods. Now there's a mix of building types, and we want to make sure that that can continue. But this is our physical pattern. Here's another view of that, a longer view looking north from Midtown along that developed spine of Peachtree Street. But that same condition also exists on the west side along Hollowell Parkway, the street itself, commercial, industrial uses, neighborhoods on either side. On the south, Adair Park, Pittsburgh, Sylvan Hills, other neighborhoods adjacent to Metropolitan Parkway. This is the pattern. So within that, understanding the place that is Atlanta, we're not Chicago or Philadelphia or San Francisco, we're Atlanta. Understanding the DNA of this city, how do we design that city for 1.2 million people? And we built it around these things. So first is designing for people, and this very much has to do with, we have to change our streets so fundamentally, it's incredible. There's no city that has a bigger challenge than us. And people don't appreciate this. I have found since I've gotten here that Atlanta's delusional. I don't know about you, but the city is its streets. You go anywhere, any city, your experience in that place has mostly to do with your experience on their streets. Yes, it's their parks and other things as well, but really it's the streets. And what do we have? I mean, we have highways everywhere. I mean, we have highways in neighborhoods. And the city was built so much on these long trips, and with this idea that we can move cars faster. We have such an incredible job to do, because unlike Savannah or Philadelphia, this is our public realm. We are not built around squares, and these streets are those places for us. And so this set of the design is all around, how do we make these streets? So as we're discussing the future of DeKalb Avenue, for instance, or Memorial, or Monroe, What the city will be saying is these places will change for the neighborhoods around them. And this will be a battle we invite you to participate in, because that's not what people think will happen. You know, we hear it all the time. I live further out, all I care about is getting into the city. Well, I'm sorry, we tried that and it doesn't work. So this is a huge part of our challenge. The second part is around nature and understanding nature here, that the city is really defined by nature, the Chattahoochee to the northwest, the South River Basin on the southeast, and then all the watersheds and the creeks that connect them. There's great work happening here on Proctor Creek now, Peachtree Creek, but we want to bring all these connectors together such that we're creating a city that is getting much more urban in the ways that you think of it, but also is getting much more natural. This is Atlanta's Lake Michigan waterfront for me, this intersection between nature and urbanism. And where we have those intersections, that we're celebrating them. And we have a few examples of this already you might not think about, but for instance, in the Emory area on Clifton, where Lowwater Creek is, or where Nancy Creek is on Roswell Road, those are examples, but this needs to permeate the city. And if Atlanta can become a place where nature is thriving and we're becoming much more urban, that will distinguish this city among American cities. It's what we have. We don't have a lakefront. We don't have the ocean, the mountains. What we have is this. And that sometimes scares people because people are afraid of nature, I've learned in this thing. I think it's wildlife, perhaps. But then there's some architectural elements of this as well, and that's, for instance, understanding the nature of our skyline, which is a very north-south skyline. And as we're changing things, and we're working on our zoning now, that we're accentuating that, because it's a really interesting orienting device in Atlanta, our skyline. So there's some really very design-oriented aspects of the Atlanta city design as well. So that is our design for the city at the city scale for 1.2 million people. And the idea is that we as a city get busy building that. You know, the way planning typically works is you're mitigating things, you're managing them. Again, passive, reactive kinds of modes. In this case, what we're saying is we're building something. This is the concept. Now we move on to developing that concept and building it, and get the residents of Atlanta out of this posture of arguing about change, because change is coming. This isn't a choice between something and nothing. It's a choice between something and something else. And I can tell you what the something else is. It's what we have in terms of a region, which doesn't work. And so we're proposing something else here. And we've started on this already. This is Broad Street in downtown, and we went here, and Broad Street had been technically closed to traffic some time ago, but cars were still on it. So it's a very Atlanta way to approach pedestrianization. Close it, but let the cars go there. It's okay. So we designed something quickly to implement and build so that we could start having a conversation about public realm in the city. And that's what this is. And we're now working in Cascade Heights. We're working in Virginia Highland. We've got neighborhoods all over the city asking for more of this. We had an event here last night, and several people came to me and said, can we do this in my neighborhood? The answer is yes. The idea is that this is the business of changing that public realm. This is the business of transportation in the city. This is not frivolous. This is the work. I'm telling you, this is just a public service announcement. I'm not representing the planners of the world right now. I'm telling you that we are in a competition for global relevance. And for cities, that competition occurs here. Nashville's working on it. Charlotte's working on it. Not to mention the cities that everyone knows as global ones in this country or in other countries. Go to Toronto and check out what they're doing on King Street. There's a battle at the street level that Atlanta needs to get involved in. And that's the purpose of this. The second thing is architecture, and I'm going to finish with this. Atlanta's expectations on architecture are so low. Not everyone's, not Terry Kern's. Now, I am very happy to be here when Terry's acknowledged today. More than acknowledged. What do you call it, Blake? Awarded or something today. It's very appropriate. This is a site at Ponce and Peachtree where a new hotel was proposed. And this was our chance to get into architecture. This is the building that was proposed for this intersection. And if you're not insulted by this, you should not be at this event. We have people building in the city that think it's just fine to build this in Atlanta. It is insulting and can't happen. And so in this case, we said to the developer, yeah, you meet the zoning. I mean, this is what zoning gets you. Congratulations. We said, you do meet the zoning, but what we'd suggest is don't bring your lawyers to this meeting. Bring a new designer, and then we can make some progress because we're not approving this. And you can sue us, and it'll take a year or two, or you can get a good designer, and 2 months we can fix it, and which is what happened. So what we did here was we worked with them. And let me just say this, that there are architects in this room probably. We went from an F to a B- to C+, but let me say, mom is happy when you do that. You know, you go from an F to a B- and things are really good. So I get that, but this was the first of what will be we've now engaged on 2 other buildings in a similar way to say, you can't do that in Atlanta. And so there's the matter of the city at the city scale and how we design it and how we're intentional about it. And then there's the matter of our public realm and how we design the streets and how we design the buildings make this place what it is. And what I want to say this morning is that I have great aspirations for Atlanta. My expectations are high. But none of that will be realized. Cities have periods of momentum, you know, if you look at it. And I have a feeling that Atlanta has the opportunity to be the city in this country with the momentum that will propel it to being seen as the place where great things are happening in this country right now. And back to the Atlanta delusional thing, that's not the case right now. There are aspects of it, but we need to take advantage of you and this city right now to really go there. And it's going to require some hard decisions and some working together. But people in this city that want a future that's exceptional are the ones that I hope drive this change. And so this is a call to you to help make this happen. Because the status quo is a mountain to climb. And so help is needed. I think that's it for me, really. Blake, you want to come up? Mm-hmm.